Salve pessoal, sejam bem-vindos a mais um vídeo. Nesse vídeo aqui eu vou estar fazendo um react. Vai ser bem diferente do que eu tô acostumado. É um react do editor do Stranger Things. Eu acompanhei bem pouco a série, eu vi só a primeira temporada, mas foram só até o terceiro episódio. Bom, pra mim vai ser algo diferente, porque realmente eu não tô acostumado a fazer esse tipo de conteúdo, mas como que tá no meio da área que eu atuo, então acho que é interessante trazer alguns insights, principalmente algumas percepções que eu vou ter aqui referente a esse vídeo. Mas, sem delongas, vamos lá ver como é que tá esse conteúdo aí. Dublagem automática? Ué, não tem português? Ué, vou ter que colocar aqui então a legenda. Não tá aparecendo pra mim?
Okay, welcome back. For today's example, we're going to look at Stranger Things Season 4 finale episode called Piggyback. It's a great example because it is massive. It's a huge episode. It's about 2 hours and 20 minutes in length with about 1,400...
Olha só essa timeline. Claro que a partir daqui a gente consegue ter uma noção, né? Tipo, aqui vem a faixa de vídeo, aqui de baixo os takes de áudio. Mas olha, muita coisa, caraca. A maior timeline que eu peguei, eu acho que foi algo em torno de 20 minutos também. Mas nesse nível aqui, é impressionante.
Or so visual effects, which, by the way, is bigger than many feature films I've worked on. It compares to, like, Free Guy.
Nossa, isso é muito top, velho. Essa parte dos VFX. Eu acho muito da hora, olha só. É um trabalho muito minucioso, né? Mas é muito interessante de ver, principalmente o resultado final. Olha, as cores, os elementos adicionados.
I'm one of the first people to start cutting storyboard sequences and previs cuts, also known as animatics. If you haven't checked out my storyboarding video, be sure to check that out. It talks about the importance that storyboards play in the filming process, so make sure to check that. I'll leave a link in the description and somewhere floating around here. I'm also one of the last people to touch the editing timeline, as visual effects are usually the last piece of the puzzle that's added to a project before it's complete. When working on a VFX-heavy show like this, it's very important to be as organized as possible. Your editing timeline is not just a place for creative decision-making, it actually becomes a database for meticulously tracking shots throughout the process. Let's start with the basics, but before we do, we gotta head over to the editing suite. Let's go. All right, here we are at the office. Let's do this. The software we're going to be using today is Avid Media Composer. This is the industry standard software for editing. I've worked in the industry for 20 plus years and I've never worked on anything other than Media Composer. All right, before we get too into this, let's look at the setup. I always work with 3 monitors.
Nó, bacana demais, né? A gente tá muito acostumado com After, Premiere, mas ver esse pessoal que trabalha no cinema usando esses softwares é muito interessante.
I have 1, 2, 3. Sometimes I'll work with a 4th monitor, which would be a playback or a client monitor.
Nossa,
Otherwise,
caraca,
my
3 monitores?
third monitor here is
Não,
sometimes used.
eu realmente... 3 monitores, 2 monitores já aumenta bastante o desempenho, porque você consegue ter um controle melhor. Só de você ter um monitor somente para a linha do tempo, isso faz muita diferença na produtividade. Porque você tem que ficar redimensionando, pegando o preview e colocando assim do lado, e perde às vezes espaço na timeline, isso é muito ruim. Então realmente é um ponto interessante. Eu, por exemplo, hoje eu estou usando um monitor ultra-wide, mas posteriormente eu vou pegar um outro monitor que faz muita diferença. Eu pensei que um monitor ultra-wide ia resolver, mas não resolve. 2 monitores, na verdade ele resolve sim, mas 2 monitores, querendo ou não, é melhor.
My third monitor here is sometimes used as my full screen playback. So the left monitor that I use.
Ah, é isso mesmo. Um é usado para reprodução em tela cheia. Outra coisa aqui é o tipo de arquivo, né? Ele deve comentar aqui, mas eu acredito que ele deve usar proxy, porque esses arquivos não devem ser nada leve.
So the left monitor that I use is for the Avid project, which you see here. If I open up a bin.
Essa é uma parte que eu não costumo já usar muito. Mixer de áudio.
To mix some audio.
Interessante.
In the middle, I have my editing timeline. Now, right now,
Opa.
it is in this full view, which looks kind of crazy, but I have my main...
Parece meio louco. Não, completamente. Tem camada que a gente não consegue nem ver o que tá ali. Ela tá quase sumindo. Aqui, por exemplo, ó, tem uma aqui, tá quase sumindo. Nossa, é muita coisa.
Timeline view, and I got my timecode window in the top right. This is the window we're going to focus on the most today. And then on the right, I use this as either a full screen playback if I don't have a client monitor. Otherwise, I use this for FileMaker or for shot tracking software. Today, we're going to use it as a full screen playback. All right, let's look at the middle monitor, and this is our timeline. This looks insane. How do we even know what we're looking at? This looks so messy. I don't even know. It looks so overwhelming. Like, it's just crazy. It doesn't have to, though. Let's break it down. Let's simplify this and actually understand what we're looking at. And by doing so, we're actually going to change how we see the timeline, because in Media Composer, you can create different views for your timeline to help create a visual representation of how you like to work and what you need to see.
Não só no Avid, né, mas muitos softwares hoje têm isso. É algo que foi integrado, né, já tem muito tempo. Eu gosto dessa dinâmica de janela. Mas ao mesmo tempo, quando outra pessoa vai pegar, é meio estranho, né? Porque às vezes fica salvo, né, a configuração que você usou na edição. Aí a janela fica com base naquilo que a pessoa editou. Aí quando o outro editor vai pegar, aí fica meio confuso, porque não é a forma que ele está acostumado. Porque cada um edita de uma forma.
So this default view is way too basic. You can see that the audio colors down below, which are purple, and the turquoise colors above are the video tracks, and it does not need to be this way. So let's change it. One of the views I like to look at is, I have a clean mode here. It says Brad Clean. I actually have a revised one that works for this newer version of Media Composer. So let's click on that, and boom, we've already gotten rid of a lot of the mess. So let's change our view here. There we go. Now we can see our video tracks,
Muito pequeno,
our source monitor, and our timeline monitor.
Caraca.
And the tracks are starting to look a lot more bearable. I have other views that I like to look at. If I have any media or clips offline, usually offline clips are noted in red. We'll take all the media offline so we can see, and there we go. All the clips here you see are red. That shows offline media.
Interessante, ó. Os clipes que estão offline, que não estão no HD dele, estão em vermelho.
When I'm delivering VFX,
Na verdade, isso tem até no Premiere também, né?
Post house to be dropped in and colored. I have a bin view for that. I call that drop-in. If I'm working on anything sound related, I'll use the audio layout, and it just makes the audio tracks more prominent and not so much the video tracks. But for today, we're going to look at the clean view that I have. This is what I work in most often. One of the things I want you to notice right away is I have a track here called TC1. This is designed for me to separate video tracks above it and audio tracks below it. I like that visual separator so that when I zoom out, I can tell where the video tracks start and where the audio tracks start. Now, one thing you may notice is that the timeline is full of colors. There's colors all over the place.
Não, isso aí é muito importante. Principalmente quando você trabalha com a linha do tempo assim, né? Porque, querendo ou não, olha, o tanto de elemento aqui é facinho de você se perder. Principalmente em relação às trilhas. Por mais que, né, tenha esse recurso visual aqui, que é colocar as trilhas em roxo, deve dar uma bagunçada visualmente. Mas, com certeza, deve falar aqui que trabalham em partes. Porque pegar uma linha do tempo inteira, assim, pra editar, deve demorar.
We're going to make sense exactly what these colors mean. But in professional editing, color assignment is essential for this kind of a workflow. It's an organizational tool. Remember, this is our database. I want to be able to look at the timeline and know exactly what's going on visually, and that's what colors are going to do, is help us out. Now, each color can represent something different, and I highly encourage you to use colors in your timeline as well. Dialogue should be a color, sound effects should be its own color, music should be its own color, and all those should be on their own tracks as well, so that when it comes time to separate, you can send a dialogue only track if you need to. You can send a sound effects only track if you need to. You can send a music only track if you need to. Colors will help you make sure that a sound effect track did not end up on a music track by accident. This is important because these are deliverables that are necessary for this type of work. So if you look at the default view of the timeline again, it's important to note what the default color of the video clips and the audio clips are, so that when we start changing them, we're not changing them to a color that's the default. We want to do something different. Video tracks in this case will be turquoise. Audio tracks in this case will be purple. We don't want to use any of those. We're not going to really focus on audio so much. Let's actually change our view to only show our video tracks. So now we've hidden our audio tracks, we're only looking at our video tracks. Now let's dive into the colors. So let's zoom in here and we see the default view of the clip color, which is turquoise. Let's say we came across the clip and we needed to make it a visual effects shot. Let's say that the window out there was blue screen or something and we needed to make it a visual effects shot. What I would do is select this clip on the timeline and then you can see it says set local clip color. I will make it yellow, and what yellow does is it pops out. It's a very visual indicator that says, hey, we need to do something with this clip. This is only
Isso é muito interessante. Ter essa comunicação é realmente muito importante.
Nothing else, really. One of the processes that we use is we will send a turnover to the vendor of a clip, and I want to know exactly what we sent them by cutting it back into the timeline. And then this color I make brown in this case. So we can see here, we have the yellow on the bottom, we got brown above it, and then you'll notice that there's blue clips above that. We'll get into that later. Okay, so we got our yellow clip, we've identified a clip that needs some work done. We've got a brown clip above it. This is what we've sent the vendor to work on. When they send something back to us, I need to differentiate that from our dailies, and so I like to make their submissions blue. You can see the blue clips in the timeline here. You'll also notice that there's a little V here on one of the clips, and if I double click this, it'll open up and show me all the different versions related to this.
Nossa, legal. Isso poderia ter o Premiere também, né? Tipo, essa opção de poder ver todas as opções anteriores descendo o clipe. É algo que não tem. Você tem que alinhar e entrar nessa sequência. Ou seja, seria uma nova sequência. O que, né, dá uma certa fadiga visual. Porque, querendo ou não, você perde tudo que você tá vendo ali. Isso é algo que é bom, ao mesmo tempo é ruim. Na verdade, é mais ruim do que bom, porque você perde a referência visual ali. Mas isso aqui é muito interessante. Assim, isso que ele tá falando de organização, de colocar as cores para a pessoa identificar o que precisa ser feito ali, isso é muito importante. E é algo que a gente não tem muito costume também, porque a gente geralmente, eu tô citando o meu caso, né? Aí você pega um projeto que você vai editar, é só você que edita geralmente. Às vezes você passa para uma outra pessoa fazer algumas correções, mas no geral é você que edita. E você edita da sua forma. Você sabe o que você vai fazer ali e boa. Mas esse tipo de coisa aqui é muito interessante.
It's important to keep the history of the shot accessible should we ever need to like refer back to something. When it comes to an editing timeline, red is usually a color that means danger or something wrong. It means missing clips. It could also mean, hey, there's something wrong with your VFX shot and you need to look at this. And so sometimes I'll make an item in my timeline red to say, hey, you need to pay attention to this, something's broken, you need to fix it. Now we're looking at the vendor versions in blue, but before we get to a vendor version, oftentimes I'm tasked with taking the footage that was shot and doing what's called post-viz on top of it. The work that I do is not something that can be sent to the DI and be built for the final product. This is just for the editing purposes. And I need to know the difference between what a vendor's working on and what I'm working on. So I usually make my clips green. Let's go take a look at a shot here as an example. I got scene 118 as an example here. And by the way, I jumped to this very easily because I have a shortcut key that when I push it, it'll highlight the search area down here, and I can type in the shot number that I want to look at, and it'll pop right to it. And just so you know, every single VFX shot in the timeline is given its own unique number so that we can track it. So in this case, we're looking at 409, which means season 4, episode 9, 118, which means scene 118, and then shot 40 in this
Nossa, isso daqui, esse daí é muito específico. Isso aqui é um nível de organização absurdo. Isso aqui, basicamente, ele comentou que os clipes são nomeados com base no episódio. Tipo assim, não é o arquivo original da câmera. Poxa, muito interessante.
In green clips, but remember, I did identify that little triangle that says that there's a history here. So if I double click on that, there we go. We have green clips in the timeline, and if I was to look at one of those, you would see the post-viz that I built for this particular shot, which is populating footage in these TV monitors here. Oftentimes in Stranger Things, we need to use footage from previous seasons. There's a lot of flashbacks going on. I like to know that this isn't a daily or a VFX shot, but this is rather something that we've already aired on Netflix and that we're only linking back to it. And I usually indicate that with white So let's look at a shot here. Again, I can easily search 409, 131, shot 40. This is not the shot, but if you look at afterwards, we have a bunch of white clips here, and looks like this is linking to season 2 footage when the Demogorgon gets Bob. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. And so you can see here that I've indicated that with white clips. All right, another situation, and this is kind of getting technical, but when we're filming Stranger Things on a camera like the Alexa will shoot not 16:9, which is more like your phone would be like a 16:9 image, but more so like a square, which gives you more real estate on the top and bottom of your image. But when we're given our dailies to cut with, they've already cropped it to a 16:9. So there are times where we want to be able to use that extra real estate on the top and bottom of the frame so that we can reframe it. And so we will have to link to the master file. I like to identify that we're referencing the full aspect ratio so that I know that I can give that note that we need to reframe the shot later on. Now let's look at an example. Again, we're going to use our handy search function here and go to 236:10. All right. You can see here there's a couple different clips that have orange. This is just indicating that we've reframed the shot. So perhaps this shot of Dustin and Eddie, they wanted to make sure that both Dustin and Eddie were in the shot, and so maybe we reframed it that way. All right, we've looked at our clip colors, but now I want to look at something different. Every show that I work on, I always create a designated VFX track. With this track, I like to put in a burn-in visual indicator of the shot number, which we can see here in green.
Eu tive que adiantar um pouco o vídeo, porque a CV10 esquentou, ela desligou. Bom que eu não perdi o arquivo, né? Antes, geralmente perdia, mas vamos lá.
Dates and a handful of different clips. This tells me what was sent on what date. I don't always need to look at this, but this helps me know what VFX shot was sent when. So let's go back out of this knowing that we don't always need to be looking at that.
Olha isso.
And bring this back down. There we go. We got our timeline back to normal here, and it's making a lot more sense now. Let's head back to the studio. I hope that makes sense. I hope you got something out of this. It's kind of fun to do a dive into the editing timeline. Not many people get a chance to see something like this, so I like to share the editing timeline.
Isso aí é algo muito importante, né? Tem várias pessoas trabalhando no mesmo projeto. Porque querendo ou não, isso diminui o tempo de produção, né? E querendo ou não, consegue trazer um resultado melhor. Geralmente, eu não tenho costume de trabalhar assim, nesse nível, mas é algo que eu acho muito interessante de ver, porque, querendo ou não, eu acho muito da hora. Cada um tem uma função, você consegue desempenhar também melhor aquilo que você está fazendo. Isso aí é muito top.
Season took about 2.5 years to make, so it is a lot of evolution of, mind you, this timeline started with nothing, as it was a blank slate at one point, and it was constant adding, constant changing, constant manipulating, and over the course of time and several people being involved, we ended up with this final timeline. All right, that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. If you like this kind of content,
nossa, muito, muito top. Gostei mesmo. Pô, o nível de produção é absurdo, a qualidade técnica, obviamente. E assim, ver alguém que tá à frente disso, como o Brad, é muito interessante, porque, querendo ou não, traz pra gente, né, meros mortais, um pouquinho de como é que é esse tipo de trabalho. Mas organização excepcional é algo que, por mais que, tipo assim, a gente não trabalhe com projetos assim, eu acho que é interessante você ter esse tipo de cuidado para que posteriormente você, né, na hora que você for se desenvolvendo e pegando projetos maiores, você ter esse cuidado, porque querendo ou não é importante. Mas pessoal, o vídeo é esse, espero que vocês tenham gostado. Eu gostei demais das explicações do Brad, e querendo ou não, vou deixar o canal dele aqui na descrição, se vocês puderem ver, quando vocês tiverem. Eu vou deixar o canal dele aqui na descrição. E é isso, pessoal. Tamo junto. Valeu. Falou.